Imagine for a moment that a person who is only 15 years old killed his grandparents. Then, after a few years, he decided to kill another family member with a claw hammer. The police were unable to capture him due to his high IQ. So sharp, so clever that he'd be standing right next to you, but you can't tell that he is the murderer. This is the story of an epitome of evil, Edmund Kemper, the co-ed killer. Edmund was born in 1948 California. While growing up, things didn't turn out to be good between his parents, which led to their divorce in 1957. His father, who was a World War II veteran, said living with his wife was not less than a war itself. Edmund was ordered to move with his mother and his two sisters to Montana, though he always preferred to live with his father. He faced a difficult relationship with his alcoholic mother because she used to behave terribly to him. He was blamed for all of her problems, and it was more like a trauma for Edmund to live with her. He was only 10 years old when she asked him to live in the basement, just because she'd thought that he might harm his sisters. He used to feel inferior, as his whole family used to sleep in bedrooms, and he was the only one sleeping in the basement. But it was not like most other basements. It was more like a trap, because she used to close its only gates by putting a table over it. This is where things started to get a bit dark for Edmund. He felt like he was never loved, neither by his parents nor by anyone else. He felt all alone all the time, and he had no one to talk to. Gradually, he was starting to build a dark fantasy life. So dark that if he doesn't get his deserved love, he will harm people. He'd always had fantasies of killing his mother, his grandparents, but he was too young for this, so he started lashing out his anger on his sister's toys, dolls especially. He used to cut off their heads brutally, like butchering someone to death. But that didn't stop him from committing his first immoral act. He'd already chosen his first two victims, his family cats. At the age of just 10, he buried one of the cats alive and slaughtered the other one. His mother sent him to his father because he was too rude for her to handle. But things didn't turn out positive there either. He was then sent again to his mother, who then forwarded him to his paternal grandparents. He was like a football in a game, passed by everyone repeatedly. He was tired. His anger was increasing day by day. The rage was getting on an alarming level. Kemper always hated living with his grandparents because of their farm. He also hated his grandmother as much as he hated his own mother. He knew that his grandparents owned some firearms, one of which was gifted to Edmund by his grandfather as a present. But he didn't know that the same rifle would take his own life. On August 27, 1964, the anger, pain, and agony buried inside him exploded, just like a bomb. He took a shotgun and shot dead his grandmother over a small argument. Then he waited for his grandfather to return home. As soon as he stepped outside of his car, Kemper shot him too. He then hid both the bodies and called his mother and told her what had happened. She asked him to call the police and tell them what a mess he'd made. And just like a good boy, he did. He called the police and confessed that he'd killed his grandparents. Police had taken him into custody, but he was too young to be arrested. But something shocking was revealed during that interrogation. When police asked him the motive to kill his grandmother, he replied that he wanted to feel what it's like to kill a human being. And the reason he mentioned killing his grandfather was so that he wouldn't know that his wife was dead. Well, the story doesn't end here. The age factor played a huge role for him. He underwent various tests which revealed he had an IQ of 145, which is higher than an average person's IQ. It was also revealed that he was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, a disease which is a barrier between what's real and what's imaginary. In other words, he was a delusional person, one who had dark fantasies, as I told you a few minutes ago. He was then sent to Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security facility for mentally ill convicts. In 1969, after spending 5 years in that mental hospital, he was finally released at the age of 21. Doctors recommended that he shouldn't visit his mother since she was abusive to him, but that didn't stop him from rejoining her again in Santa Cruz, California. During these 5 years, his mother had already ended her third marriage and was doing a job at the University of California. People thought Kemper had changed because he was attending community college and trying to look out for jobs. He said his favorite job was to become a police officer because of his IQ and knowledge which he'd gained from cop shows and movies. But unfortunately, his dream of becoming a trooper was crushed since the police department didn't hire him because of his weight and the criminal history he had. He weighed a massive 300 pounds, and he was almost 6 foot 9 inches tall. By looking at this, he was nicknamed Big Ed. But that didn't stop him from being friends with police officers. His nature attracted them, and slowly and gradually, their friendship became deeper. So deep that he started borrowing things from them. One of them lent Edmund his handgun, and another lent him a pair of handcuffs. Is that stupidity or a big blunder? Handing someone a handgun who has a small history of criminal behavior? Well, police officers didn't know what he'd do after that. He made sure that he'd use the gun once again. This time, not the shotgun, but a handgun. He was struck by a car while riding his motorcycle while working in the highway department. He believed the car salesman had made a mistake, so he filed a lawsuit against him and won a sizable $15,000 sum. Now, since he was unable to work, he had to pass his leisure time, which he did by noticing a large number of women who were hitchhiking in his area. He'd already made up his mind to commit murders or any other horrific act. He then put all the necessary stuff in his car to kill a person, like guns, knives, and handcuffs. It was now the appropriate time for him to commit his first murder. Anita Luchessa and Mary Ann Pesky were his first two chosen victims. During the ride, he first stabbed Anita multiple times, but he thought she was still alive, so he decided to make sure by strangling her to death. Then he decided to go for the other woman, who was Mary. He took his sharp knife and stabbed her to death. After the murder, he decided to return to his apartment where he chopped off their heads and hands. But that was not it. He then did something which would blow your mind. He had sexual intercourse with the corpses. After committing all these horrific, unethical, and unimaginable acts, he decided to throw out Anita's remains. He drove to a wooded area in Santa Cruz and threw her head there. The victim's parents had already filed a complaint that their girls were missing. Several days passed, and no one heard a damn thing until August 15th when they found Anita's head in the woods. Later in the same year, in 1972, he decided to humiliate an underage girl. His third victim was Aku Ku, who was just 15 years old, waiting for the bus to arrive. But she didn't wait much longer as Kemper had already arrived to give her a hitchhike. Unfortunately, she didn't know she would meet the same fate as Anita and Luchessa. During the ride, Kemper told Aiko what's going to happen to her. Despite knowing, Aiko helped him to take out the tape from the glove box, which he used to shut her mouth. He told her that he'd tie her up and put her in the trunk, but she refused to agree and instead asked him to put her in the back seat of the car. It was like a business deal, continuously negotiating. He then reached out to the back seat of the car and put an index finger and thumb on her nostrils so that she'd stop breathing. She struggled, but due to his weight and height, there was nothing she could have done. He then continued to hitchhike and hunt for other women. In January 1973, he chose his fourth victim, who was Cindy Schall. He took her in the car and they went for a ride. During that ride, he threatened her with the gun, which he ultimately used later by shooting her dead. As he knew his mother was out of town, he then went to her apartment and hid the body. But that was not all. He started cutting the body and more like dismembering it, which he said took a hell of a lot of time. He threw all her body parts in the river, which were later discovered by police after being reported by people washing up on shore. But there was still one main body part missing: her head. Do you know what he did with her head? He buried it in his mother's backyard. Yet he wasn't done despite committing all these murders. He still had the urge to commit more, and he did. He used the parking sticker his mother gave him from California University. Well, he made sure to use it in his way. He then did the same thing just like the rest of the girls: hunt and then kill. On February 5, 1973, he offered a ride to two of California's students, Rosalind Thorpe and Alice Liu. Shortly after picking them up, he shot them dead. He knew what he was going to do with the bodies as well. He started decapitating the bodies, but this time he did something different. He gently removed the bullets from their heads before dispersing their body parts in various places. Both the bodies were later found by hikers in San Mateo County. This is the point where he picked his second last victim, a victim who had given birth to him. None other than his own biological mother. Well, he decided a week before that he was going to kill her. In April 1973, he visited his mother at her home, where, just like usual, things didn't work out between them. He then waited for his mother to fall asleep, and as soon as his mother went to sleep, he took a claw hammer and started smashing her head. To make sure she was dead, he took a sharp knife and cut her throat from ear to ear. And as he'd done with the other victims, he started decapitating her body. He said that he took her voice by taking out her larynx, a body part which helps humans to speak. And now certainly, he wouldn't be harmed by any of her words. After killing his mother, he thought it would be suspicious if she didn't show up on weekends with her friends. So, to cover that up, he decided to take another life, who was his mother's friend, Sally Hallett. He invited her over so they could watch a movie outside together with his mother. But little did she know that death would be waiting for her. As soon as she came outside, he asked her to sit on a couch so he could attack her. And she did. She sat, and he struck her head with a hammer. And to confirm that she was dead, he strangled her with a cord. He then left both the bodies at the apartment and decided to leave town. He thought that now he'd be caught, which is what he always wanted. But before that, he had to take care of his car, which he used to commit multiple murders. He didn't burn it or leave it somewhere where police couldn't find it, but instead he drove it across the street, which was a few blocks away from his apartment, and left it there. He then took his mother's car and left for Pueblo, Colorado. He was paying close attention to the radio during that trip, so he could hear the reported crimes he'd committed. However, nobody mentioned the murders at any point during the ride. He became exhausted and decided to turn himself in. He called the police and used his own nickname to confess the murders. He said, "It's Big Ed talking." The police officer who picked up the phone knew him, but he couldn't say for sure that it was a prank call or that he was really serious. He said, "I have every evidence that I'm the co-ed killer, and I want to turn myself in." Police arrived at his given location and took him into custody. He then went on trial in October 1973 and was charged with 8 murders. When the judge raised the question of what should be your punishment, to that he replied, "I want to be tortured to death." But he didn't receive any capital punishment since it was suspended in California at that time, but he did receive 8 concurrent life sentences. He's still alive today and serving his life sentence in California medical facility Vacaville. As we reach the end of this video on Edmund Kemper, we're reminded of the disturbing nature of his crimes. Kemper's story is both fascinating and horrifying, and it's clear that his actions have had a lasting impact on those around him. While we may never fully comprehend what drove him to commit such heinous acts, studying his story can help us better understand the psychology behind violent behavior and how society can prevent it. If you found this video informative, we encourage you to like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you again soon. Take care and goodbye.